Fellow Mountaineers, old grad, young lads and lasses, we've made it to another edition of the Trust the Beard podcast. What a beautiful day in the Mountain State today. This is Monday, September 15th, 2025, about 7:30 a.m. Oh, what a time to be a Mountaineer fan. Am I right, guys? I'm still on cloud nine after Saturday. I can't seem to come down. And, before we went to bed Saturday night, I rolled over to my wife. I said, we beat Pitt. And then first thing in the morning, Sunday morning, I did it again. And then right before we were going to sleep on Sunday night, I rolled over and I was like, we beat Pitt. I can't get it out of my head. What a phenomenal performance from our guys and Coach Rod. Certainly redeemed himself from 2007. Not completely, but it was a huge step in that process. And I just want to start out. This obviously we're going to break down the Pitt and WVU game, the Backyard Brawl, 108th edition that happened Saturday in Morgantown. But I have a message to fans, and in particular fans that weren't around for the first Rich Rod era, or maybe they were too young to completely follow it, or if you're a new Mountaineer fan altogether. This is hard edge. What you witnessed Saturday was 100% pure, unadulterated Rich Rodriguez football. Again, for you young lads that may not know, this is what us old grads have been talking about, waiting on for 17 years. Right? When we get upset about those 17 years, whoever the coach was, when we would gripe about that stuff, this is why. What you witnessed on Saturday is exactly what we have been waiting on. All that talk and all the hype of hard edge and what Rich Rod could bring to the program, you literally watched it on Saturday. That hard-hitting, physical, conditioned, never say die attitude. Welcome to the Rich Rod era 2.0. And I hope you soaked it in, because that was, I won't say 7 years, because year one was in 2001 was a little shaky, but for 6 years, that's what West Virginia football was. What you witnessed on Saturday against Pitt, that's what we got to experience for 6 straight years. A little bit in 2001. There were some moments, but it really set in those other 6 years. And of course, the highlight was 05 to 07. Now, don't get me wrong. We still have a long way to go. But the Backyard Brawl wasn't just a step in the process. It was a giant leap. After OU, it looks like we were down and we really couldn't do a whole lot, right? We couldn't get our offense going. Our defense still looked good, but multiple times in that Backyard Brawl, we faced adversity, right? Down 10 points at halfway in the fourth quarter. We had back-to-back interceptions, came back with 17 unanswered points to win in overtime, 31-24. And I just can't begin to tell you guys how much we've been looking forward to this. And so I want to go back through some tweets that I had. And the only reason I'll show these up on the screen here. The only reason I'm bringing these up is because, right, we all on different podcasts all kind of say the same thing. I just want to put these up so I have it as a record that I'm not stealing off of somebody else. These are original thoughts of mine. And if I do steal from somebody else, or at least borrow a thought, I'll typically let you know that I saw it here, watched it here, whatever. And so I first thought that after watching tape of Central Michigan and Pitt last week, and I say tape, I watched some highlights on YouTube. I had said that, Pitt had only led Central Michigan 24-17 with 3 minutes left in the third quarter. And then I watched some of Michigan and Central Michigan, and halfway through the second, Michigan already led 28-0. And Michigan's ranked 25th, I believe. And the fact that a Central Michigan, a MAC team, who I'd looked at their schedule, they're okay. They're not a great team. But halfway, or almost into the fourth quarter, they were only down 7 to Pitt. And here you have Michigan, who's 25, already scored more points, already has a bigger point margin against Central Michigan halfway through the second quarter, 28-0. And then they went on to rout them 63-3 or something like that. Michigan did. That kind of showed me that stat right there, or that look into it, that Pitt has flaws. Pitt allowed a MAC team to hang around late into the game. Now, eventually they put it away because I think Pitt just had better athletes than Central Michigan. But their play wasn't that great. Their play was average enough, mediocre enough to allow a okay MAC team to at least hang around. And that's when you start to see where a team, or at least gauge how good or bad a team is, right? Michigan put it all over Central Michigan from the start of from kickoff, right? They had no issue with it because Michigan's probably a legit top 25 team. And we all talked about Pitt, right? Eli Holstein, his arm, that offense, Cade Bell, their defensive line, yada, yada, yada. We were hyping them up as if they were a top 25 team in the making. It's like, well, they started 7-0 last year. And, you know, one of the reasons they hit the skids because Eli Holstein got hurt and a lot of other starters got hurt. And so now they're all back and healthy again. Well, they were healthy before the game started. And somebody had replied, and I'm not gonna say who. And they had replied to that original tweet about Michigan and Central Michigan, saying like, well, that's, you know, there's not a transitive property. Like, just because they're leading by this much over a team that's losing now, yada, 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 that doesn't mean, basically saying like, that doesn't mean anything. And I replied with this tweet. I said, it means versus a legit team that Central Michigan doesn't look good. And I went on to say that Pitt has major flaws that can be exposed. And sure enough, we exposed those flaws. And one of the major flaws is that it looks to me, under pressure, Eli Holstein isn't that great. He made a lot of bad throws, and we punished him. And there's a picture that floats around all the time from Pitt fans. You know, it's after the 2007 game, and I'm not sure which player it is, but he's sitting, and I'll show it here in a minute, but he's sitting on the sideline, or on the field, with his head in his hands, with a defeated look, right? Because they just upset us 13-9. Now there's a new picture that's going to be circulating from now until we meet again in 2029. And so that picture, what I'm showing you now, that was the face, or that was the photo of 13-9. This is now the photo of 9/13, September 13th. Look at that. That is a look of defeat. He's battered. He's bruised. He's got gauze up his nose. He's all taped up, right? That's their leader. That was their supposed dark horse Heisman Trophy candidate who was going to light us up. And he looks like he just got finished with Apollo Creed. That's what we did to Pitt. That was a mark, right? That is a brand of Rich Rodriguez football coupled with Zach Alley football. And I will say Zach Alley, I tweeted this out earlier in the day. I think it was about close to halftime. Zach Alley is worth every single penny that we owe him. And probably more so. What he has done to transform our defense. Now, part of that is we got a lot of new players, right? And you know, through the hard edge, off-season conditioning and the winter workouts and spring ball and fall camp and all that stuff, he's forged these guys to play like this, right? Who knows if former players that were still here that left, who knows if they could play at this level, right? There might be a reason they left because they couldn't handle it. But I strongly feel, and this has been said before, that Zach Alley is the defensive counterpart to Rich Rodriguez, right? They are one and the same, just on separate sides of the ball. And the way we played defensively, I can't get over it. We dominated that game. Well, I wouldn't say dominated, but we came at them with everything we had. And if you've noticed in the post-game press conferences, this was also brought up. Of course, you know, you have Narduzzi talking about, oh, the calls were unfair, they were lopsided, somebody got spit on, and, you know, and then I saw this other tweet, I'll put this up here, that Eli Holstein said that he got punched in the face. You know, talk about sore losers. You know what I mean? I mean, you got beat up. You got out physical. That's why you lost the game. You had it in hand, right? Remember we got on to to Neil Brown in 2022 because he punted instead of going forward on 4th and 1, right? And then we, you know, had a chance to win that game, and the ball goes through Ford Wheaton's hands, right? And then last season we were up by 10 with like 5 minutes left, and then we collapsed. It's exactly what Pitt did this time. They collapsed. It was what, 4th and 4 on hour 39 with I don't know how the exact time. It was a handful of minutes, 2-3 minutes left, whatever it was. And if they had a chance to go for it, and if they got a first down, that's probably the game, most likely. And instead, they tried to get us to jump off sides. They took a delay of game because they couldn't get a timeout fast enough. So that put them in 4th and 9. So they had to punt. And right there is where they lost the game. And I think Rich Rodriguez knew it. I think the players knew it. I think in that moment, they saw where Pitt conceded. And I would think from Narduzzi's perspective, he thought that they were going to, right, our offense wasn't really generating a lot of yards or points up to that point in the game. So I thought he probably thought his defense was going to hold him. But no, Nicco came back, came alive, drove us down the field, and, what they say is the rest is history. Now, I will say this. I saw this on Country Roads Confidential. It was like their rapid reaction show. And I kind of agree with him, is that I think Mike said it was a little bit of fool's gold, that final drive. As amazing as it was, we put it together, and it's not to diminish anything that was accomplished. However, the offense we were running at the time is not a prototypical Rich Rod offense, right? It's not. It was fast-paced, but it wasn't run it down your throat. It was hurry up and let's sling the ball around because we only have 2 minutes to score. And in that environment, Nicco thrived because I think that's what he's used to. He's better equipped to just sit back, stand in the pocket, and pick you apart. And I think Pitt probably took some pressure off, right, to have more defense in the secondary to try to almost to prevent defense a little bit. And we made plays when we had to make plays. Again, not taking anything away from what they did, but I think Nicco found himself in a more comfortable position than running the traditional Rodriguez offense, right? He didn't have to scramble. He had time to sit back and pick them apart. And, it may be an issue of 2 years ago when Neil Brown, that 9-win season, right? At the first half of the season, our offense was really just ground and pound, right? Play tough defense. And then we went up against Houston and we had to throw it around. And I said at that time, I said, the mother of, or what was it? I'm going to screw this up. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? We had to throw it around to keep up with Houston because that was the Holgorsen offense. And so our offense took a step that day, a huge step in being able to air it out a little bit when we need to. The offense had evolved that night. Well, perhaps this is what's happened in the Rodriguez offense. Maybe we have evolved. We saw who stepped up to make plays. Rodney Gallagher had himself a day. Finally, we got to see Rodney Gallagher. 7 receptions, 61 yards. Grayson Barnes, 5 receptions, 58 yards. And probably the biggest touchdown of the season up to this point, right? He tied the game with that leaping grab. And Nicco just put it right where he needed to. Grayson Barnes went up. I mean, that was beautiful. And that's going to be a highlight that sticks in the, put that in the vault of historic moments in the Rich Rod era, right? You think of Grant Wiley's goal line stop against Tech, Pat White breaking loose against Louisville, Owen Schmidt, runaway beer truck in the Fiesta Bowl, right? We all know those moments from the Rich Rod era. That Grayson Barnes catch is going to be one of them, for sure. I mean, he etched himself into Mountaineer lore. I tell you who had another day, and a guy that stepped up was Tye Edwards. I truly believe we found our replacement for Jaheim White. 25 carries, 141 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, those are what I would assume are Jaheim White numbers if he was still healthy and running. And you hate for them to get injured, Jaheim White and Jaden Bray. But that just means more guys have to step up. And they did. They did what they were supposed to do. It's a next man up mentality. And, you always say that. You always hear it. But sometimes the next man up isn't that great, right? We saw that with Scotty Fox. And, I feel bad for the kid. He's still a work in progress. I think the moment just got too big for him. And that's okay. That is a teachable moment. And the great thing about it is it still didn't hurt us. We only allowed 6 points off those turnovers, right? And Pitt had it, if not in the red zone, pretty close to the red zone. And they easily could have scored 2 touchdowns and probably put the game away at that point. But again, Zach Alley and the defense stood tall and forced field goals instead of allowing touchdowns. And that's a teachable moment for Scotty Fox, right? That's how you learn. You make mistakes. And I know a lot of people say that, well, we shouldn't have benched Marchiol for Scotty Fox or Henderson. We can say that now. But you know what? In Ohio, everyone was clamoring for Henderson, for Scotty Fox. Excuse me. They all wanted the backup because Marchiol just wasn't cutting it. Well, you got your wish. And I don't think Henderson did too bad. I mean, it's not his fault that his center was driven right into his lap, But everyone wanted the backup, right? Well, look what happens. Sometimes next man up isn't always the best option. And so Marchiol came back and led us to victory. But those guys that I named, Tye Edwards, right, Gallagher, Grayson Barnes, Justin Smith-Brown had a huge play. Cam Vaughn made some, he had a quiet day, 3 receptions, 34 yards, but I think they were really focused on him in coverage. Preston Fox had a huge play when we needed it. It's not about always how big your stats are, but when those plays happen, right? When those stats occur. And they all came in big moments when we needed them the most. And so that's what a Rich Rodriguez offense can do, right? It truly is next man up because they're all trained and conditioned to have that aggressive mentality, that hard edge mentality of never giving up. I can't get over. Oh, another one I wanted to mention is Eddie Vesterinen. I'm so glad that kid had a day. I've been waiting on him since he came under the Neil Brown era because you just kept hearing that he was steady Eddie, right? He just has a high motor. He does not stop. And you were rooting for him last year and he got hurt. And he's just a guy you can't help but root for. Like he embodies what it is to be a West Virginian, even though he's from Helsinki. The Helsinki Hammer is what I want to call him. Copyright. But he had 4 tackles, 2 sacks. I mean, I'm so glad he had a day. I've been waiting for that kid to pop, and today was a big day. And this was a great day for everyone to come out of their shell, so to speak, and just have a day. And so with that, I'd like to talk about what the win means for the program, what it means going forward, all that stuff. And it means a lot to Rich Rodriguez. We know that. I know he liked to kind of shrug it off as, this win cannot equate what happened in 2007, right? He's like, it still bothers him. It was the worst day in his career as far as like coaching, like on the field stuff. And, I can understand that. And I don't think that this win lives up to what Pitt did to us. I don't think it ever can officially until we knock them out of contention for a national title. So that would have to be like a playoff match, right? Playoff matchup. That's about the only way that would happen, unless somehow we find ourselves in the same conference at some point in the near future. I think that's the only way that we could ultimately equalize what they did to us in 2007. Keep you from playing for a national title. However, to get this win in that fashion on 9-13 is a pretty close second. Because clearly Pitt was the favorite team, right? They were favored by, 7.5, I think. They had all these guys back. They had their offense, right? They had their Dark Horse Heisman trophy. They had Desmond Reed. And we punched them in the mouth, and they were not ready for it. And so that was a statement game for this program. Huge statement game. If you remember in 2002, we won on the road at Cincinnati, right? That was our first road win under the Rodriguez era. That was a statement win. We went on the road and beat Virginia Tech, right? I talked about the Grant Wiley goal line stop. That was a statement win. Beating Virginia Tech when they were number 3 at home with that 97-yard touchdown, Rasheed Marshall to Terrence Garvin. That was a statement win. This is one of those statement wins. This is going to be in the like I said, put it in the vault of highlight reels for Rich Rodriguez in his 2.0 era. This was the first one. And I'll say this too. I told my wife this the other day. You know, we were watching the game, right? We had family over, had a cookout, smoked some ribs, had all kinds of tailgate food. It was great. A beautiful day. And we're sitting there watching the game, and it's into the first quarter or into the second quarter, and we're up 7-0. And if I believe, I'm going to look at some stats here. So first of all, the very first play, we cause a fumble and almost recover it. That guy should have just fell on it, but that's okay. But we forced Pitt to punt twice. Then they missed a field goal. And then, late in the second quarter, about 3.5 minutes, we scored a touchdown. And after they missed that field goal, there was about 5 minutes into the first quarter, or 5 minutes left in the first quarter. I didn't want to say it out loud, but I kept thinking to myself, I was like, we can win this game. We can play with these guys. Because if you're going to upset somebody, and I heard this on 3 guys, it's like you got to start fast, right? And I thought defensively, we certainly did that. I had another tweet out, and let me find it here. I said things that will help West Virginia in the Brawl. 1, it's at home. 2, Pitt hasn't been challenged yet. And 3, it's Pitt's first road game. So those were my thoughts going into the game. Like, you know, we may not have the talent. We may not have the skill players and the continuity and all that stuff that Pitt has, right? Because after the OU game, we were all feeling pretty down about ourselves. But it's home. Pitt has not been challenged, and they haven't played on the road yet. And we know what that environment is like at Mountaineer Field. And we knew up to that point what Zach Alley's defense was like, right? It was physical, and we forced turnovers. That has been clear for the first 2 games. I don't think that suddenly goes away. We didn't know to the extent of how good they were going to be because we had some lesser competition, at least we thought, than Pitt. And so we knew we would give them a game. And I just had that thought in my head after they missed the field goal. And like I said, you know, we got to start strong in these games if we're going to upset them. So we withstood, you know, their potent offense, right? They ran 3 plays for -10 yards the first time, punted. They ran 8 plays for 25 yards, had to punt. Then they ran 11 plays for only 28 yards and missed a field goal. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 2 of those drives, I know at least one of them because they missed a field goal, but 2 of those drives, I think they started in our territory. If not, they were pretty close. So we were giving them the benefit of not having to drive very far. And in 11 plays, they only go 28 yards. And then, again, they missed the field goal, and I'm just thinking to myself, we withstood. I mean, we didn't really have any mistakes. Our offense just wasn't getting generated. We did miss a field goal and had to punt. But we expected to do that, right? We weren't expecting our offense to just suddenly show out. So we had some struggles there early. But we withstood what we thought was a potent Pitt offense. And after that first quarter, they came away with nothing. And that's when I thought to myself, we can win this game. But that's how you do it. You start to believe, right? You take one little step. And I'm sure the coaches on the sideline were saying, like, look, remember the scene from Rocky IV when he's fighting the Russian and Rocky takes a huge swing and he cuts the Russian on the face and he goes back to his corner and his trainer, Tony, was like, look, he's bleeding. He's just a man. He's just a man, right? That's what I felt after that first quarter when Pitt missed the field goal and we go into the second quarter and then score another touchdown. I'm like, look, they're just a regular team. There's nothing to be afraid of. And I think you could see our players starting to understand that too. And they started to believe. They're like, look, we can handle these guys. They're not scary. They're not as potent as we thought. You put a little pressure and they're going to crumble. That's exactly what happened. We beat the crap out of Eli Holstein all game. He got some he got some good shots, right? He had some good throws. They had a couple big plays. They were leading by 10. I mean, they had their opportunities, but we beat him down. And I'll show this picture again. That is the face of Rich Rod, Zach Alley football. And I hope every Mountaineer player puts that picture up on their locker and like, this is what we can do, right? This is what we are capable of. You know, fair, legal, within the limits of the game, right? As Rich Rod always says, but you can deliver some serious punishment. Now, as I was saying before, what does this mean for the program? Huge boost, right? Everyone starts to get on board. I heard this on the Three Guys Before the Game podcast, that this is the kind of game where people start to believe. And I heard it on the Old Grad podcast with Whitey Crum and Reed Williams, which I highly recommend. It is so much fun. That is a fun podcast. And they both said it, and it's worth repeating, is a game like this is where the players start to believe. They start to understand what's been drilled into them all spring, all summer, all fall. The hard edge mentality. This is what that means. This is what happens when you buy into that. Great things happen. And so when you have a win like this, and with a crowd like that, and the recruiting that was going on, right? Rodriguez said all the top recruits were there. This was the biggest recruiting day of the year, and they got to witness firsthand what hard edge means. And those players see it, right? It's tangible. You see it come to fruition. This is what happens when you follow the Rich Rodriguez hard edge method. You get results. And so now it makes them more confident. And then they want to buy in even more. They want to push a little harder. Maybe even push themselves harder than what he's pushing them, because they know it comes with results, positive results. So this was a huge win, obviously, for all of West Virginia, all the fans, Rich Rodriguez, the players. Now moving forward, right, we have Kansas next on the road. Then we have Utah at home. And either team is no slouch, right? I said before that Pitt is going to be our hardest test up to this point. And I still think OU was a hard test. I'm not degrading anything that they did. I just don't think we were quite prepared. We weren't in sync, right? I still think Pitt is probably a more talented team than OU, but I don't think Pitt has the physicality and aggression like we had. They were not prepared for that defense. I think they still had the Neil Brown era mentality in their head. Like, we know what happened last year. You know, we had our way in the last 5 minutes, and it just wasn't that way this time around. They got punched in the mouth early, and, you know, as they say, the rest is history. But coming up, we got Kansas Saturday at 6 p.m. And, of course, I'll have my review with that later in the week, but they're no slouch. Then we're at Utah, or we have Utah at home. They're certainly no slouch. They're 16th in the country. Then we go at BYU. We get a break, and then we're at BYU on a Friday. No, I'm sorry. I was wrong there. We don't have a break. We play Utah on the 27th, and we have a shortened week, and we go at BYU. So these next 3 games, I mean, it's going to be a bit of a gauntlet. And so these good feelings we have, huge win, but moving forward, we can't rest on this win. You know how if you lose a game and there's that mentality of we can't let that team beat you twice, right? You're hungover from the loss, so you lose the next week. You can't let that win cause you to lose, right? You can't be so high on that one that you're not ready to get over it and you puff yourself up, which I don't think Rich Rodriguez is going to allow his team to do, right? It's the next step, the next game. So if we can go out and get a win at Kansas, which would be very impressive, maybe more impressive than the Pitt game. I think the Pitt game culturally for the program and for the state was huge because it's your huge rival. But I think Kansas is a much better team than Pitt. So I think the overall perspective, if you look at, you know, college football as a whole and how they would look at the Mountaineers, I think that would be a more impressive win to go out to Kansas and beat them. And so the program takes another step. And again, we'll break all those numbers down, later in the week. But if you get that win, you got Utah at home, who's ranked 16th. That's going to be huge. That will probably end up being a primetime game because right now it's to be determined. TBD is the kickoff time. I'm going to that one. for family reasons, I'm kind of hoping it's earlier. There's just some stuff going on, and we're still going to the game, but I would not be surprised if we win at Kansas that's a late game, especially if Utah, they have Texas Tech this week. If Utah beats Texas Tech, I believe that's going to be a huge matchup, and it'll probably be a primetime game. I would think. It kind of depends on who else is scheduled. I think maybe there's a couple other big games on ABC and ESPN. Fox may be able to take it over. They might have a big game too. So it's hard to say. I kind of, it's probably not at noon because I don't think they would do that to Utah because that would be 11, 10 o'clock their mountain time, right? So that'd be like a 10 o'clock game for them in the morning. I don't think they would do that. I would imagine maybe like 3:30 would be the game, but we'll have to see. That's 2 weeks down the road, right? Let's get through this one first against Kansas. But just looking forward, right? Tony Caridi always says it's not as bad or it's not as good as it seems. So as good as we have it now, that feeling, let's not overstep and just think, well, now we're on the freeway to the Big 12 title, right? We have much harder games to go than Pitt. This was a huge step, right? Culturally, out of the college football perspective, this was a huge step to beat Pitt. We needed this, but there's a lot more tougher opponents to come. And so does our offense regress to what it was against OU against in future opponents? It could, right? I don't think this automatically means we're going to get 9 wins again. It's like after the first game, well, we're going to win 9 wins. And after the second game, we're lucky to win 4. And now Pitt, hey, we're back to 9. You know how fans are. I'm still just hoping for a bowl game, right? My 2 goals were beat Pitt and get a bowl game. So we're still on track for that. And I'll mention this last right before we close out. I've been rambling on for about 40 minutes now. I said that Robert Morris and Ohio were preseason games, and the real season starts against Pitt. And I truly mean that. And I know we thought we were going to beat OU, right? So that's kind of a step back. But if you look at the grand scheme of our schedule in college football, the Robert Morris and Ohio game do not have a real impact on where we can be at the end of the season, right? It's an out-of-conference game. I know it was on the road against a MAC team, and it does look like a tough loss, but it was only 17-10, right? We didn't get blown out. And if OU proves to be a really tough team, if they win 10, 11 games, then you can easily chalk that up to, oh, okay, it was the first year of Rodriguez, 80 new players. We were still finding ourselves. OU kind of has their stuff together a little bit more. They're a good team. It was just a bad day for us, a good day for them. You really can just look at it that way. It was a bump in the road. And so I think we can forget about those first 2 weeks, almost like they didn't happen. Because I at least to me, I believe that Pitt was the first real game of the season, right? It is out of conference, so it doesn't affect our conference schedule, but it is your longtime rival. You have to win those games. If you're going to have good seasons, those, the barometer game that we always talk about, it used to be Maryland, now it seems to be Pitt. Well, we got that. We got that win, that barometer game. So that usually tends to lean in the winner's favor or lean favorably to the winner. And so that was the first crucial game of the season, right? If you use that preseason, if you use my preseason as an example, right, that RMU and Ohio were just preseason games and Pitt was the first real game of the season, we're 1-0, right? And then we got Kansas and Utah because the first 2 games have no effect on the Big 12. And neither does Pitt, but it's a huge rivalry. It's all about our psyche and our culture, and we won that game. So that's a huge boost for us. So let's keep that momentum going, right? And just see where we go. I feel great about this team, right now because they faced a lot of adversity and they came through. Now, all the games aren't going to be this hyped up, right? We're not going to have a full stadium rocking, singing Country Roads and Sweet Caroline, right? That atmosphere means something. That helps us. We're not going to have that every single time. You can't always count on that, especially on the road, right? It's the complete opposite, right? It's all that fanfare for the other team. So we'll have our lumps. We're still going to take our lumps this season, right? It's not going to be sunshine and roses from here on out. but we've showed that we are capable to upset somebody and face adversity. So we got our first one out of the way, right? The biggest challenge up to this point was Pitt, and we overcame it. And so moving forward, right, we all feel a lot better. But again, there's going to be lumps. And so we have to remember that this was just the first step. It was a giant leap, but we have a long way to go before we get back to where we want to be, right? The 05, 06, 07 year. So I'm going to close that out. Overall, I give this win, I graded an A. It didn't matter the score. It did not matter the stats. We just had to get the win, and we did that. And so I give it an A+. And moving forward, we'll just see what we have going on. It looks like we have our running back settled. Looks like we have our quarterback settled. I don't think there's any argument that Nicco's going to be the guy from here on out. Scotty, you still got to learn. Henderson, I think there's a place for him to come in certain spots. But yeah, I think Nicco he solidified himself as number one. And we may have a legit top 25 defense, maybe even top 10. Who knows? It's possible. I'll say that. It is possible. We have shown the signs that we could have a very, very good defense this year. And I'll leave with these stats. So for the game, we rank 10th in the country in sack percentage. So that's the percent of time when the quarterback drops back to pass, how many times he gets sacked. And we were 10th in the country with 13.64 for Saturday. For the game, we ranked 31st in the country for Saturday, or for week 2, with 4.5 yards per play. Rush yards per play, we ranked 6th in the country, allowing only 1.4. Right, this is just for the game, just for Saturday. That's where we ranked 10th, 31st, and 6th. It's pretty impressive. Of all the teams that played on Saturday, all the defenses in those categories, that's where we ranked when all the dust settled on Saturday. Now for the season, we're tied for 16th with takeaways per game at 2. We're tied for 2nd with interceptions per game at 2. And then, for the season, we're like 43rd in the country in third down conversions allowed with 4.5, which is not a alarming stat, right? It doesn't jump off the page. But compared to where we were a year, 2 years ago defensively, to be top 50 and allowing third down conversions, that's pretty good. And if I could go back into the stats, I believe we were way down the list at third down conversions. I mean, we were just letting people move the chains left and right. And so you can see an incremental increase in where we've been as a program defensively with Zach Alley. And they're going to have to carry the load a little bit this year, I think, early on until our offense continues to evolve. Again, they took a big step on Saturday, but I would look for them, again, to carry the water a little bit and just keep us in games. That's all they need to do. Just keep us hanging around within striking distance. And if we can get there in the third quarter, if we're still hanging around, like Rodriguez said, the longer we play, the better West Virginia is, because we will out-physical and out-condition them. And you saw that Saturday against Pitt. They were not ready for that. Again, when Narduzzi failed to convert that fourth down and punt it instead, that's when they officially conceded. And we took the game over from that point, scored 14 straight points. And so what a day for the Mountaineer fans. Enjoy this, soak it in. We'll get ready for Kansas, and I'll come back this week with my breakdown as we travel out to Lawrence and face the Jayhawks. So appreciate you guys listening. Remember, subscribe, like, share this channel to everyone. Appreciate all the support you guys give me. Remember, hype fades, stats speak. Goodbye. God bless. Go Ears.